many times do you think a person could be struck by lightning and survive? Once? Twice? Well, let's find out. So the story starts with this guy. His name's Roy. And Roy, he's about 30 years old when this begins, and he works as a park ranger in Virginia at Shenandoah National Park. And he's a pretty hard-working guy from what I can tell, and he loves his job. He takes it very seriously. But then, one day, in 1942, something crazy happens to him. Because he's at work up inside a fire lookout tower, and it starts raining. And it keeps raining harder and harder, and before long, there's a huge storm. And suddenly, kaboom, lightning slams into the tower. Then kaboom, it strikes again, and then again and again. In fact, it strikes about 8 times. And suddenly, fire is jumping all over the place. And pretty quickly, the tower catches on fire. And so Roy, he knows he has to get out. And so he rushes down the tower and he just starts running, trying to find somewhere else to take cover. And that is when kaboom, a bolt of lightning crashes straight into him. And it shoots down his right leg and it blows off the toenail on his big toe. And he collapses to the ground. But see, Roy, he isn't ready to die. And being an experienced ranger, he manages to evacuate the mountain and get medical help. And thankfully, he fully recovers. And about 27 years pass. And so it's now 1969. And Roy is 57 years old at this point, and he's still a park ranger working at the park. And one day, he's driving along a park road during a heavy rainstorm, and that is when it happens again. Suddenly, kaboom, lightning hits his truck, and the bolt shoots through the open side window and it zaps Roy in his head. And instantly, his watch gets fried, his eyebrows and hair catch on fire, and then Roy blacks out completely, and he loses control, and his truck veers off the road, and boom, it crashes into a ditch. But Roy, he isn't ready to die. So he's able to get help, and he survives, and he, again, eventually fully recovers. Then, a year after that, it happens again. One day, Roy is outside in his front yard doing some gardening, and the weather is completely calm. No rain, the sky is relatively clear, but as he's out there, a storm is starting to develop around him, and suddenly, kaboom, lightning hits a nearby power transformer, and the electricity jumps straight over to him, and it hits him in his left shoulder, and this throws him through the air, and he crashes into the ground hard. But once again, Roy isn't ready to die, so he survives. But then, a few weeks later, shit gets really weird, because he's standing outside his trailer home with his wife, and it's storming, so they're pulling clothes off the clothesline, and again, kaboom, a bolt of lightning comes down and it hits, not him, but it hits his wife. Now, luckily, she survives. But at this point, it feels like a storm is just following Roy around, trying to kill him with lightning, and that bolt that hit his wife was actually really meant for him. And from here, Roy gets paranoid, and he develops a deep psychological fear of thunderstorms. And so now, whenever one approaches, he ushers his wife and kids into the living room where they'll be safe, while he sits completely alone in the kitchen away from them. That way, if lightning ever strikes him, it won't hit them. Well, about 2 years go by. And one day, Roy is at work in the park, working inside the guardhouse, and he's registering visitors who are arriving at the campground. And it starts raining. But, no big deal, it's just a light rain. But then, without warning, kaboom! Lightning strikes the guardhouse. And the electricity bounces through the guardhouse, and it hits Roy, and bam, his hair catches on fire again. And this could be the end of him, but once again, Roy isn't ready to die. So he rushes to a nearby sink, and he tries to stick his head under the faucet. But his head, it won't fit beneath it. So instead, he's able to smother it with wet paper towels and put the fire out, and he ultimately survives. Now, by this point, the man, he's been struck by lightning 4 times in his life and survived, which is just an incredible story. So word starts getting out, and journalists start hitting him up for interviews, and his name starts appearing in newspapers all across the country, and he becomes kind of a minor celebrity from this. Like, people nickname him the Spark Ranger. And he makes a few television appearances from all this. And the Guinness Book of World Records eventually contacts him, and they research his story and they verify it through medical records and eyewitness testimony and whatnot. And they end up giving him a world record for the only living person known to have survived 4 lightning strikes. Anyway, eventually he returns back to work at his park ranger job. And as much fun as the fame has been, he's still really paranoid about storms from all this. In fact, he now carries a bucket of water around in his truck just in case he ever gets struck and catches on fire again. And so one day he's out on patrol at the park and he sees a dark storm cloud forming and he's super paranoid. So he's like, oh shit! And he drives as far as he can away from it, trying to get to safety. Once he's completely out of the storm range, he decides to pull over and take a look. And right when he steps out of his truck, kaboom! Out of nowhere, lightning strikes right at him and it knocks the shoes off his feet and it sets his hair on fire again. But he is still not ready to die. So luckily, he's able to put out this fire with the bucket of water that he always carries with him now. And if that isn't crazy enough, about a year goes by and Roy is walking along a mountain trail. And yet again, he sees a dark storm cloud forming, and he just starts running away from it this time. Nope. He is not taking any chances. He's not about to get struck again. But regardless, kaboom, he gets struck again. And this injures his ankle, and it catches his hair on fire again. But, Roy survives because, he's not ready to die. But this is time number 6 that he's been struck by lightning. And this is when he's finally reached his breaking point. He can't keep going through this. And staying, living, and working in the Blue Ridge Mountains, where he's always elevated, this is constantly putting him in danger. So he officially retires from being a park ranger, and he and his wife and kids, they move away to live in another town. And about a year goes by, and one day, the wildest thing happens. Roy is out on a local pond on a small boat, fly fishing, alone, and suddenly, kaboom, lightning strikes him directly in the head. And the current burns up his torso and his hair catches on fire once more. But Roy, again, he isn't ready to die, and even though he's badly injured and all burnt up, he manages to make it back to shore. But then, a motherfucking black bear appears out of nowhere, because it wants the trout that he just caught that's still in his boat. And so this bear charges his boat. And Roy, he ain't about to get attacked. So thinking quickly, he grabs a loose tree branch and pow, he hits the bear over the head with it. And this is enough to scare the bear, and the bear runs away. And so he's eventually able to make it to the hospital and get treatment for his injuries. And luckily, once again, he survives. And about 5 more years pass. And no more lightning strikes. After being hit 7 times in his life, there's not going to be any more. But around this time, at 71 years old, he's dealt with long bouts of paranoia and depression, and one day he decides that he's finally ready to die, and he unalives himself.